Have you ever seen anything as bad as this directed, targeted attacks sustained?
In America or in Britain?
America.
Directed at individuals. I mean, the worst, it seemed to me, was in 2020. That was a real period. I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier.
But 2020 was mass rioting, which is
over
violence.
Months.
And then you had it culminate with the autonomous zones. But those were leftists against government. I'm wondering if, and I don't know, Libby and Brett, if you've seen anything, what we're seeing now is random attacks on people for political purposes if they can be identified, meaning the Tesla car itself is enough identification for these attacks to escalate on these individuals.
It's a good point. I remember in Portland, someone wearing a MAGA hat was killed. This is something that Andy reported.
Aaron Daniels?
Was he?
Yes, that's right.
I think was it Daniel Sin? I could be wrong. Was he wearing a MAGA hat?
He was Trump identified.
It's Trump identified.
Yeah.
So this is a clear difference, right? So it's no longer, we don't need to identify what their politics are.
And there have been attacks at Republican polling stations and stuff like that in the past. I think the difference between this and 2020 is that 2020 was less focused, and it was just an outlet of anger. It didn't matter who it was. They were just going after any business that they felt like tearing down at the time, which is why businesses that wanted to survive had to put signs up in their window to please, please, please leave me alone. But at that same time, they were going up to random people and asking them to raise their fist in the air to force compliance on people because it was a form of power.
Yeah, there was definitely, in terms of like the attacks on Tesla cars, not just individuals, but Tesla cars. We did see, again, in 2020, we saw the attacks on statues, right? People were tearing down George Washington statues. People were so stupid that they were tearing down statues of abolitionists, saying, that they were racist. And it's like, really? Because they were abolitionists. It was Danielson.
They
Aaron
would
Danielson.
Still be considered racist by today's standards.
The reason why I'm asking this is I'm curious, Winston, your perspective on where this country goes. Obviously with the, Trump being criminally charged, but now he wins. Now the Democrats are saying what he's doing is unconstitutional. Now we have Elon who's working with Trump, and people are just either there's terror attacks against dealerships. They're physically attacking people. Do you see a scenario where things start to chill out maybe, or what do you think?
I think that the way it's heading is, and I note what I said earlier about no Democrats really calling this out, is that we might end up that something really awful happens. God forbid, I don't want it, but it would take something really awful, it seems, for Democrats to finally speak out against what's going on. And even then, to be honest, I'm not sure it would.
There's plenty of examples. Talk. They're not going to change their rhetoric.
And there's plenty of what happened in 2020 that they didn't speak out, even when terrible evils were happening.
No, they put websites to bail people out in their bios, is what they did.
And Kamala Harris promoted it.
Exactly.
But Tim, is your question, because you think that we're in a particularly bad place, is this where you're pushing me here?
Well, I'm curious.
I think this is really different this time.
The reason I wanted to ask before I gave my thoughts, because I didn't want to influence what your thoughts on this particular moment may be. Maybe, you'd say, look, I've seen stuff like this and, people are going to forget about Tesla or something like that. But I actually argued this is substantially worse in terms of the political escalation than we saw in 2020. And that's because we had this conversation a week or two ago. Is it worse now than it was in 2020? And I think it is worse. Certainly not the amount of violence occurring. It's the targeting attacks, the type of violence. So we have the mass swattings. You had, 20 plus or more swattings targeting prominent right-leaning individuals. Now you have, so it's scaling up in every tier of the right. At the lowest level, some woman, for simply having a Tesla, might not even be political, gets punched in the face repeatedly by a lunatic. Then you have the mid-tier, the influencers, getting swatted. You had Owen Schroyer brought out of his house with his hands up, and they told him to take his shirt off because the police are pointing guns at him, and cops don't know what's going on. Then at the highest level, of course, you have the administrative attacks, attempts to arrest and jail Trump and his people. But now that he won, that is being stopped by Trump at the highest level. Of course, we have a counter with Krispy Noem, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. But in 2020 with the riots, it was random rage. People were mad about Trump. They're mad about lockdowns. They're mad about George Floyd. And they were going out and attacking random things.
And everything.
Anything and everything. They burned down buildings. They attacked random people. That is very, very bad in terms of the sheer violence. But a riot may not go anywhere. Right? The riots happened, I think, largely because of COVID lockdowns, built up a lot of rage. The George Floyd story was the spark that gave people the excuse to go out and be angry. And they weren't overtly targeting people, though. There was one guy in Portland who got shot twice in the chest. And it was violent with the Chaz Chop, where they actually shot and murdered people, unloaded their rifles on some teenagers in a van, in an SUV. Crazy. What we're seeing now, though, in terms of political escalation is random street-level terror attacks, mid-level terror attacks in the digital space, bleeding into the physical space with swattings, mid-level terror attacks with fire bombs and mass shootings on dealerships. This seems to me worrying escalation where what happens when a leftist gets run over? Some guy already did that. He jumped the curb and drove through some protests against Tesla, and they got out of the way. He got charged. What happens when one of these individuals shoots one of the people that are attacking their vehicles? Then the left says, they're attacking us now. The fascists are attacking us.
What they did with Kyle Rittenhouse.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.